In a small, quiet village in the African wilderness, an old widow named Miriam has lived a solitary life ever since the passing of her husband. Though childless and alone, she found companionship in the most unexpected way. A giant baboon she named Kofi. Kofi wasn't just any animal. He was loyal, intelligent, and strangely human in his emotions. As the years passed, Miriam and Kofi formed an unbreakable bond, living in harmony with the wild around them. But what happens after Miriam passes away will leave you speechless. Kofi's actions following her death defy everything we know about animals and their understanding of loss. Stay with us as we unravel this heartwarming and unbelievable story of love, loyalty, and a creature that was far more than just a pet. Welcome to AI Film City, where we share heartwarming stories that inspire and touch the heart. If you enjoy emotional tales filled with love and compassion, please like, subscribe, and share to join us on this journey. Miriam first encountered Kofi when he was just a baby baboon, lost and separated from his troop during a brutal storm. She found him huddled and shivering near the outskirts of her village, his tiny frame trembling in the cold rain. Miriam, ever compassionate, couldn't leave the poor creature to fend for itself. She wrapped him in her shawl and brought him home, never knowing how this small act of kindness would change her life forever. Kofi, though wild at heart, seemed to sense Miriam's warmth and care. Over the days, as she nursed him back to health, feeding him and keeping him safe, a deep connection formed between them. Kofi began to follow her everywhere, mimicking her movements and expressions in an almost human way. The village was baffled. Some even warned Miriam against keeping such a wild animal, but she paid them no mind. In Kofi, she saw a companion, a reminder that love and kindness can cross the boundaries of species. Little did anyone know, this bond would grow stronger than anyone could have predicted, with Kofi becoming not just a pet, but a true family to Miriam. As Kofi grew, so did the bond between him and Miriam. He wasn't just a pet or a wild animal in her home. He became her constant companion. Every morning, Miriam would walk through the village, with Kofi by her side, towering over her, yet always gentle. The villagers, once skeptical, began to see the uniqueness of their relationship. Kofi had a certain intelligence about him. He would help Miriam with daily chores, carrying water, fetching wood, and even tending to the small garden outside their modest home. Miriam often spoke to him as if he could understand every word, and perhaps he did, because Kofi always responded in his own way, with soft grunts or tender gazes that seemed full of understanding. Despite being an animal, Kofi displayed an emotional depth that was undeniable. When Miriam was sad, he would sit beside her, his presence a comfort in her loneliness. Their bond was a beautiful example of how love and connection can transcend species. Life was simple, but for Miriam, it was complete. But time waits for no one, and as the years passed, Miriam's age began to catch up with her, leaving Kofi to face an unimaginable challenge when the inevitable arrived. Miriam's health had been declining for some time, but she had always been strong-willed, determined to live each day to its fullest with Kofi by her side. However, one fateful morning, she didn't wake up. Kofi, as always, was by her side, nudging her gently with his massive hands, confused when she didn't respond. He whimpered, his instincts telling him something was wrong. He sat by her bed for hours, waiting for her to wake up, but she never did. The village soon discovered what had happened, and with heavy hearts, they came to pay their respects to the kind widow who had lived among them for so many years. But Kofi, overwhelmed with grief, wouldn't let anyone near Miriam. He stood guard over her body, his massive form a barrier between her and the world, as if protecting her in death just as he had in life. The villagers, both touched and fearful, watched as this wild animal mourned the loss of the only person who had ever shown him love. They didn't know what to do. How could they take Miriam away when Kofi refused to leave her side? His loyalty was heart-wrenching, a testament to the deep bond they had shared. For days after Miriam's passing, Kofi remained at her side, refusing to eat, sleep, or leave the house. His once lively eyes were now filled with sorrow, and his powerful body seemed smaller, weighed down by the grief of losing the only family he had ever known. The villagers, unsure of how to help, left food and water outside Miriam's home. But Kofi ignored it. His grief was palpable, and it was clear that he was mourning in a way that was shockingly human. He would sit by her bed, gently placing his hand on hers, as if willing her to wake up, to come back to him. The village elders, deeply moved by the sight, spoke of how animals, like humans, feel the loss of those they love. But Kofi's mourning was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was as if he understood the permanence of death, yet refused to accept it. Days turned into weeks, and still, Kofi stayed by her side, his once strong and powerful body growing weaker with each passing day. The bond between them, forged through years of companionship, was now being tested by the ultimate separation, death. The villagers were torn. They wanted to honor Miriam and give her a proper burial. But Kofi's unyielding presence made it impossible. The sight of this giant baboon, grieving as if he understood the depth of his loss, left everyone in a state of emotional conflict. Some argued that it was time to intervene, to somehow separate Kofi from Miriam so that they could lay her to rest. Others believed that Kofi deserved his time to mourn, just as any human would. The elders gathered to discuss what should be done. Could they sedate Kofi? Would it be safe to even attempt that? The truth was, no one wanted to harm him. He was, after all, a symbol of the love and compassion Miriam had shown throughout her life. The villagers had watched Kofi grow from a small, helpless creature into a majestic animal. And now, watching him mourn Miriam was heart-wrenching. They knew they had to do something, but they wanted to handle the situation with the same care and compassion that Miriam herself would have shown. In the end, they decided to give Kofi more time, hoping that he would eventually understand and let them take Miriam to her final resting place. After weeks of mourning, something remarkable happened. Kofi, weakened by his grief and the lack of food, finally rose from his place beside Miriam. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside, gazing up at the sky as if searching for something beyond his understanding. The villagers watched in awe as he slowly made his way to the small garden where he and Miriam had spent so many happy days together. There, among the flowers she had lovingly tended, Kofi lay down, his eyes filled with a deep, soulful sadness. It was as if he was saying his final goodbye, not just to Miriam, but to the life they had shared. The villagers, realizing that the time had come, gently approached Miriam's house. Kofi didn't resist. He watched quietly as they carried Miriam's body away, his eyes following them until she was out of sight. It was a moment of profound emotion, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had shared. The village elders later said that it was as if Kofi had given his blessing, allowing them to lay Miriam to rest. But what happened next would leave the entire village, and anyone who heard the story, astonished. Even after Miriam was gone, Kofi remained in the village, but he was never the same. He spent his days sitting in the garden, staring at the horizon, as if waiting for Miriam to return. The villagers, deeply moved by his loyalty, cared for him as best they could, but nothing could fill the void left by Miriam. Then one night, something unbelievable happened. The village was asleep when a group of thieves snuck in, intent on stealing from Miriam's home, now abandoned since her death. But Kofi was there. In a moment that would be talked about for generations, Kofi, once a gentle giant, sprang into action. With a strength fueled by his loyalty to Miriam, he chased the thieves away, protecting the home that had once been theirs. The villagers awoke to the sounds of the commotion, and when they arrived, they found Kofi standing guard, just as he had done in life for Miriam. It was a moment that left everyone in awe. Kofi, the baboon who had been loved by a widow, had not forgotten his duty. Even in death, Miriam's love had left an indelible mark on his heart, and he would protect her memory for as long as he lived.